Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would talk about not only this video that I'm about to review, but actually two videos that I'm going to end up reviewing today. And this is mainly going to be about the Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano situation. Why am I talking about this situation once again? Because, the certain videos that I end up posting, they're not all in all just to give my little analysis. They're not just overall because I like posting videos and because overall I have a bunch of fun with them. Even though I do, I do overall love, doing videos about boxing and other sports, because sports is very, very enjoyable for me to watch, especially that of the sports of combat sports. But another big part of the reason overall why I post certain videos is to get out, at least in my opinion, the proper context and the proper narrative that should be propagated when it comes to certain fights or when it comes to certain athletes. And unfortunately, a lot of the channels that I see, and keep in mind, I don't have any personal issue with any of these channels out here. I'm not just overall trying to tear them down because, I don't like them or, I hate this person personally. I don't hate any one of these guys personally. Now, do I think that, some of them overall, do I think that some of them make sometimes some sleaze bag moves? Yes, I do. But it just is what it is. But Boxing Ego, he's going to post a video. And we all know Boxing Ego, at least from the videos that I've reviewed in the past. If you're a person that truly knows what's going on with his channel, don't get me wrong, I think it's a very great thing that he's successful. I think it's a very great thing that, he has found a platform. But when you start using that platform, which is 90% of the time what Boxing Ego does with this, when you use that platform to basically create confusion and delusion, that's when all of a sudden I step in and I say, no, you know what, it didn't happen like this. People overall really need, to, look at the fact of the situation. They need to look at it for themselves, because spreading false narratives, in my opinion, can be very, very harmful. And I think that it can be very, very harmful to a certain amount of people. I think that it is very, very important to be self-accountable. I think that it's very, very important overall to be truthful and sometimes even downright blunt with yourself, very, very honest. Because if you have a failure, no matter in what it be, if you're an Amanda Serrano and you did not win this fight, or no matter what it be, if you have a failure and if you just make repeated excuses, basically saying that I ended up getting robbed, which, let me give Amanda Serrano credit. I haven't heard her state that as of yet. But who knows? Because these people that are claiming that Amanda Serrano ended up getting robbed in this fight, and all in all, Amanda Serrano clearly should have won, biggest robbery of the year so far. No, I'm sorry, but if you believe that this fight was a robbery, it's no offense, but more than likely it's because you really don't know how to score a boxing fight that well. It just is what it is, and I don't overall tell people things, appealed on their emotions. I don't tell overall things, to people that make them feel better. I tell things overall that I believe will help them in the long run. And if you overall tell certain fighters, or if you tell certain people, even if we're just talking about boxing fans, even if you tell certain people that, oh, the only reason why Katie Taylor won this fight, and they do the same thing with Canelo Alvarez and Vasily Lomachenko and Tyson Fury, even though they're very decently great, Caucasoid fighters, they do the same shit when they try to rank those fighters at the number one pound per pound spot. And all they try to promote is basically, oh, well, the only reason why these fighters, the only reason why they're ranked that high is because they have the complexion for the protection. Well, is it really just because they have the complexion for the protection? Is it really just because they're Caucasian fighters or could be, looked at as some of the Caucasoid fighters? Or all in all, is it because that Katie Taylor, not only is she an Olympic gold medalist, but she's undefeated in her career. She's been a very decently skilled boxer. And in my view, she pretty much just thoroughly outboxed Amanda Serrano. Now, I just rewatched the fight for myself. The first time I watched the fight, I had it about 7 rounds to 3 or 8 rounds to 2. I had it that wide, And to be quite honest with you, you still could argue, in my view, that the fight is about 7 rounds to 3. But I would not, give Amanda Serrano any less rounds now that I rewatched it than that of 3. You could argue that, in my view, at least from a logical and objective perspective, someone who's been scoring fights for a very decently long time now, and has learned overall the process of it over a certain amount of time, you can maybe debate that Amanda Serrano won about 4 rounds. But in my view, she really didn't win any more than that. I gave Katie Taylor clearly the first 2 rounds. The third round was a bit more competitive, but I thought that Katie Taylor had the better output in the final minutes, final 30 seconds of that round especially. The fourth and the fifth round, I gave the Serrano. The fifth round, of course, was the clearest round for Amanda Serrano, probably the clearest round of the fight. Yes, she hurt her very, very badly, but at the end of the day, that was the only round that Amanda Serrano really won 100% clearly. All the other rounds, you can maybe debate, were a little bit debatable. I gave Amanda Serrano, when I rescored it, I think I gave her rounds 4, 5, and 6. Those are the only rounds that I gave her. Every round after round 6, in my view, Katie Taylor was clearly winning. She clearly was landing the more impactful punches. Yes, Amanda Serrano was the pressure fighter. Yes, she was coming forward, but please tell me, what punches was she really landing flush? There were certain punches that she would land here and there, maybe a good left hand here and there, maybe a good uppercut to the body, but the majority of the most impactful headshots and counter punches were coming from Katie Taylor. All right, so you're not going to help Amanda Serrano, you're not going to help any of these fighters, and you're also not going to help any of the people that watch your channel if you just tell these guys, or if you tell these people, well, the only reason why Katie Taylor won is because she has a complexion for the protection. No, you have to be very bluntly honest, with these fighters, not only with fighters, but with people in general, because that helps them in the end, go to a higher level of honesty and truth. It just is what it is. And if you basically say, this shit, but of course, these channels are known for that. That's why they gave so many excuses to Deontay Wilder. That's why Deontay Wilder got his ass whooped in the third fight against Tyson Fury once again. Pretty much just like I predicted, because you weren't helping Deontay Wilder. Boxing Ego and Dante's Boxing Nation and Aki TV, they always say that, well, Deontay Wilder deserves a big apology. Deontay Wilder owes an apology to himself, and the only people outside of Deontay Wilder or anyone within his camp that really owes him an apology is the super fans that went on that bullshit pro-racial narrative about how Tyson Fury, cheated Deontay Wilder and he put egg weights in the gloves, because Deontay Wilder, unfortunately, he was a fool enough, overall, and he wanted to make an excuse enough, and I get it. It's very, very, hurtful to lose a boxing fight in front of the whole world, in front of millions. I get it. I understand. But at the end of the day, if Deontay Wilder was even going to have a chance to win that third fight against Fury, you had to tell Deontay Wilder, no, you know what? You didn't lose that second fight. You didn't overall lose pretty much both fights before that third fight against Tyson Fury because you got cheated. You lost because, dude, you're the inferior boxer. It just is what it is. You don't have the footwork. You don't have the stamina. You really overall don't have the boxing IQ. You're a plan A fighter. You mainly look for the knockout. You mainly look for the right hand. And Tyson Fury is more multi-dimensional than you. So if you're going to beat Tyson Fury, you got to work on your skill set, dude. But at the end of the day, they didn't do that. So the only people that really owe an apology to someone like Deontay Wilder are the fans, like a Boxing Ego or a Dante's Boxing Nation, who were telling him that bullshit. Overall, that was a bunch of horse shit from the beginning. But anyways, Mr. Boxing Ego, he is going to be talking about the Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano fight. And I also am going to be talking about another video afterwards. Let's get into it.
Robbery. That's all I can say. Amanda Serrano loses to Katie Taylor for undisputed robbery of the year. What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Listen, I'm not truly happy right now. What turned out to be a fun fight, there was an electric crowd.
Well, of course you're not happy, Mr. Boxing Ego, because let's be real, and I've already stated this before. Are there such things as great white hypes or Caucasian or Caucasoid fighters or athletes in general getting covered in a better light? Yes, you can certainly debate that in a multitude of sports. No doubt about it here and there. But you really have to discern the difference between someone who's a great white hype or someone, who gets put on such a level because they really don't deserve it. And overall, it's mainly because it's about race, or also because that fighter, not only because, yeah, sure, they might be Caucasian, but do they also have the credentials? And Katie Taylor certainly now has the credentials. Before, it was debatable, in my view, that she was the number one pound for pound. It was either her or Claressa Shields, in my opinion. Some, of course, would also throw Amanda Serrano in there, and I wouldn't have had a problem with that. Now it's undisputably Katie Taylor. That's the reason why Boxing Ego is not happy, because he hates these fighters like Canelo Alvarez and Fury, all in all. And understandably, Canelo, he's not a full Caucasoid in my opinion. He's mestizo. He's mixed. But, at the end of the day, they count him as a Caucasian fighter because of his complexion, when it comes down to it. They hate Katie Taylor. They hate Tyson Fury. They hate Lomachenko. They hate overall a lot of these fighters. You notice, once again, the only Caucasian fighter that these channels really don't have a problem with is Josh Taylor. Why is that? Because Josh Taylor, he's not a real threat to the number one pound for pound spot. The only fighters that they don't like is fighters that could be a threat to the number one pound for pound spot. Because the narratives that they always try to pull out whenever a Caucasoid or some other fighter, besides an American black fighter, is ranked as the number one pound for pound, they always debate, oh, well, they're only ranked that high because they have the complexion for the protection. No, Katie Taylor is now undisputably the number one pound for pound fighter in women's boxing. What's also interesting? Katie Taylor was also 35 in this fight. So according to Aki TV and Dante's Boxing Nation and Boxing Ego, no offense to them, once again, it's nothing personal against those channels. I have nothing personal against them. But 90% of the time, they're just full of shit. It is what it is. They're trying to promote a narrative that is agenda-driven, that usually is pro-racial-driven. It just is what it is. It's going to be interesting. Is anyone going to debate that Amanda Serrano that she was 2 years younger. She was 33 years old, at the best point in her career. And Katie Taylor, by many, many analysts, was was not only 35 years old, but when it comes down to it all in all, she was looked at to be on the decline, getting hit more, exchanging more with her opponents, not being as slick as what she used to be within the past couple of years. Are they going to pull that Floyd Mayweather Jr. versus Canelo Alvarez, near 40 years old, excuse out their ass? They're not going to do it, But anyway, and Katie Taylor, unlike Floyd Mayweather Jr., when he was 36 years old, and that's not me trying to say that, 36 is not getting up there in terms of age. But when Floyd was 36 years old, he was at a way better version of himself, in my view, than what Katie Taylor was at 35. Now, don't get me wrong, Katie Taylor was still debatable the number one pound-for-pound fighter. So we have to give Amanda Serrano the greatest amount of credit possible, because Katie Taylor was debatably at the best point in her career, maybe just, instead of, say, at 100%, maybe at, let's just say 90, somewhere around there. But anyway.
Madison Square Garden, you had joint promoters, Jake Paul, MVP Promotions, Amanda Serrano, Katie Taylor, Eddie Hearn, rematch room, and we just did the Boxing Ego watch party. The fight itself was very fun. It was a fun fight to watch. Both women, congrats for showing heart and valor and an intensity and a willingness to win. But what I just watched was an absolute robbery. There's no way you can...
Well, no offense, Mr. Ego, and once again, I have no personal issue with you. I wish everyone the best of luck. I have no personal hatred, for anyone out there. But at the end of the day, you really aren't qualified really to talk about boxing at the end of the day, at least in a serious and objective, logical manner. All right, you're like Shannon Sharp or Skip Bayless whenever there's a conversation about LeBron James. You really can't trust either of them, because anything will kind of come out of their mouths, because one completely adores him and the other one overall hates him. So once again, Boxing Ego, he's shown his true colors overall within his past, content. And basically what he's shown is that he is a part of the pro-black cult known as New Media.
Convinced me that Katie Taylor won the fight. I don't have to rewatch it. I don't have to ask a friend. I don't have to phone a friend. She lost. It wasn't even a hard fight.
I don't have to rewatch the fight. Well, anytime that more than likely you tell someone that you don't have to rewatch the fight, that's basically someone acknowledging that, more than likely I don't want to rewatch it because I don't want to believe that fighter maybe potentially won.
To score for real. Amanda Serrano, I think she did the better work. There was also...
Because even certain fights that I've believed that there have been certain robberies, like Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder in the first fight, where I thought Tyson Fury clearly should have won the fight, probably even 9-3. And every single time I've watched that fight, I've scored it at least 9-3. Every single time. I've watched that fight about several different times to get a better analysis on it. That's why, when I made this video, I thought overall to give a better analysis for you guys, or whoever may be coming in here, I rewatched the fight. And Amanda Serrano, maybe she was a little bit more competitive than what I once previously thought, but I'm sorry, she did not do enough to win the fight. Her guard was down the whole entire time, which I had a fear overall that may come up, but I couldn't tell if she was going to adapt or not, because once again, I could not watch her most recent fights, unfortunately, because they were really nowhere to be found on any platform, unfortunately. But I had a feeling that if she fought with her hands down the whole entire time, more than likely she was going to get outboxed in this fight. And she did.
A particular round where she badly hurt and rocked Katie Taylor. And if you know the rules of boxing, when that happens, the judge has the carte blanche to score that round as a 10-8 round. And
yes, they have the carte blanche, or they have the power to score the 10-8 round. They didn't. There wasn't a knockdown. So quit bitching. It is what it is. This is also the same dude that was bitching and moaning about how Tyron Woodley, about how he didn't win the first Jake Paul fight and he thinks he got robbed. So this dude's just a fucking idiot in the first place. There's no offense against him once again, but he's really not qualified to talk about boxing or really anything in a serious or logical matter, because he's shown us that he's not logical and he's not objective. You can't take this dude seriously.
That would have made a whole lot of sense in this case, because Katie Taylor was barely hanging on and clinging on for dear life in that given round. So I don't have my scorecard because I was hosting the watch party, as you guys seen. But all in all, I know what's fair. I know what's not fair. And that's...
No, you really don't know what's fair and what's not fair, because if you truly knew what was fair and what was not fair, you would not be calling this a robbery. All right? You're also the same dude that alleged that Tyron Woodley got robbed in the Jake Paul fight. You're also the same dude that alleged that Deontay Wilder was cheated with egg weights and poison in the water or drugs in the water, all sorts of stupid bullshit. So how seriously can we really take you? Once again, no personal issues with these guys whatsoever, but the truth has to be told. All right, once again, I'm a very, very decently blunt person. All right, especially when I think the truth needs to be put out there. How serious can people really take your objective analysis anyway? Because you really don't have an objective analysis. A boxing ego always says, and I agree with him here, that people who repeatedly get things wrong, or all in all that their topics, they're usually so off kilter, they're so completely wrong. They should be held accountable overall, for their actions. They should be held accountable for what they say. I agree. People should always be held accountable for what they say and what they do. But Mr. Ego, overall, he does not hold himself accountable for really being wrong in a good amount of fights. That's not me saying that he's wrong on every single prediction, but you can see all in all that in a certain amount of his videos, just like Dante's Boxing Nation and Aki TV, their emotions guide them overall more than their logic and objectivity.
That Amanda Serrano, I'd be very curious, and I'll make future videos once I do the research to look at the CompuBox, because I could tell she was the aggressor throughout the fight. So, 9 times out of 10,
Well, the CompuBox isn't always a teller of who wins the fight. Marcos Maidana, I believe, may have even landed more punches, at least by the CompuBox stats, overall than what Floyd Mayweather Jr. did. Does that mean that you believe that Marcos Maidana won the first Floyd Mayweather Jr. fight? Come on now. Jose Luis Castillo. Now, a lot of people, of course, thought that Luis Castillo, that he beat Floyd Mayweather in that first fight. Personally, I haven't watched it in years, so I can't really tell you. But at the end of the day, the CompuBox stats said all in all that Jose Luis Castillo should have won that fight based on the CompuBox stats. You can't take a look at a boxing fight and just take a look overall at the amount of punches landed, especially if there seems to be a marginal difference, let's say even by 20 or 30. Now, some may say, well, that's not a marginal difference. That's a pretty big difference. But yes, but the reason why you can't always score fights like that based off of CompuBox stats. Now, if there's a difference between like 100 or, something like that, then more than likely there was some sort of robbery that took place. But if you're talking about a fight sometimes to where, there are only punches that were missed by 20 or 30 or even something like that, you can have certain rounds where Amanda Serrano had that great that great round in round 5 where she landed way more punches on Katie Taylor in that round than either of them did on each other in any other round. That's why you can't judge fights just based off of CompuBox stats. You have to watch the whole entire fight, because one round a fighter might land, let's say, 30 punches and hurt the fighter very, very badly, but then the next round the other fighter's starting to come back, only allows that fighter to land 10 or 15, and in return that fighter's landing a good 20 to 25, let's say. So that's why you can't judge fights just based off of CompuBox stats.
pretty sure I won't be wrong. Serrano probably threw and landed more punches. Her punches also were more authoritative, even though this was Katie Taylor.
No, her punches really were not more authoritative because she was barely landing. Her punches were not more authoritative. Katie Taylor's punches were the punches that were more authoritative.
Division, and Katie Taylor was getting bullied in spots. They both traded in the final round, and
she was getting bullied in spots, but Amanda Serrano also was getting bullied and pushed back a little bit in certain spots, or at least running straight into shots. So let's be real.
Gave it their all, and Serrano was getting hit with some big shots too. But at the very last sequence, if you look in the 12th round during that exchange, Katie Taylor's legs buckled really bad. So I would have to give that exchange and that sequence in that round also to Amanda Serrano. One judge gave Serrano the fight, two judges gave.
Well, Amanda Serrano, I thought, had a nice little comeback within the final 10 seconds of that round against Katie, but I did not personally give it to her because Katie Taylor actually stumbled Amanda Serrano, I believe, early in the round with a good left hook and then a straight right, and she had a mouse on her eye. She actually backed up and stumbled a bit. Katie was the one that was outlanding Amanda. Once again, when I rewatched the fight, I think I scored it 7 rounds to 3, but 6 rounds to 4, Katie Taylor also would have sufficed as well. Either way, I'm sorry, Amanda Serrano did not win this fight.
Katie Taylor the fight. It was a pure robbery. Not feeling it. This is what hurts boxing. This is what hurts the sport. And further condemn.
No, the fight overall didn't hurt the sport at all because the right fighter won. The right fighter won. It hurt you because overall you want Claressa Shields to be remembered as the #1 women's pound-for-pound fighter, just like you want a Black American fighter to be remembered as the best generation or the best of this generation as well. And that's very possible. Terrence Crawford or Earl Spence, especially depending on what they do, they could be possibly remembered as the #1 pound-for-pound fighter of the 2020s, or at least the first half, depending on how long their careers last, other than that of Canelo Alvarez or someone else. So it's very possible. But this fight was broadly known as the biggest women's fight that not only was happening within this time, but the biggest women's boxing fight within history. So Boxing Ego knew that not only was this going to be a debate about who the best and the greatest fighter is of this generation, but they know that there's going to be a debate that Katie Taylor, that she's now going to be in that conversation, undebatably being the greatest women's fighter of all time in the sport of boxing. And certain people may think that that's hyperbole. I don't think it's hyperbole at all. What other, women boxers are really out there that can really compete with her resume? I mean, Layla Ali, I'm sorry, maybe it's just because I didn't really watch much of her career. I don't know really one elite fighter that she beat. Right now in women's boxing, this is the best that it's ever been, and it's still somewhat limited. But at the end of the day, this was pretty much the Sugar Ray Leonard Marvin Hagler fight, or all in all, basically the Floyd Mayweather Jr. versus Manny Pacquiao fight of women's boxing. It was a very competitive fight in certain rounds and certain stretches. Katie Taylor came out on top.
The sport. I'd be interested to see what Serrano, her team, Jake Paul have to say, but I'm going to get ready to watch the Oscar Valdez, Shakur Stevenson fight. But all in all, this is a black eye for boxing because boxing tries to force feed you a champion. And people...
You see that? Basically, what did Boxing Ego say? He told on himself. He basically said that boxing is trying to force feed you a champion. Basically, under the lines, if you read in between the lines, what is he saying? God damn it, they let this white bitch win. It is what it is. I did not want this to happen because I wanted Claressa Shields to be remembered as the best of this generation. Now Amanda, of course, probably could have been remembered as the best of this generation had she beat Katie, but they hate some of these Caucasian and Caucasoid fighters so much. And once again, don't get me wrong, if there's such a thing as Caucasian athletes or Caucasoid fighters being promoted in a better light, in a fairer light than that of black fighters or black athletes, certainly, no doubt about it. But once again, when you spread narratives like, oh, Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano, or Katie Taylor and Canelo and Lomachenko and these fighters, they're only looked at as that good because they're the big white hypes. No, I'm sorry, that's false. That's incorrect.
Spend money in training camp, blood, sweat,
and Ego has alleged this with so many Caucasian fighters and so many fighters from other areas. He alleged it with Tyson Fury in the Deontay Wilder fights. He alleged it with Jake Paul in the Tyron Woodley fight. He alleged it overall now with this fight. He alleged it with Vasily Lomachenko. He alleges it with Canelo Alvarez. So it's like, how trustworthy can you really be? Are all those fighters, every single one of them, really big white hypes? Or do you just have a personal issue?
Years, have family, relatives, and friends come out just to be robbed by judges who don't fight, and it's unfortunate. I feel bad for Amanda Serrano because I truly...
Well, you shouldn't feel bad for, Amanda Serrano should feel bad for herself because she did not do enough to win the fight.
Believe she won the fight. It's not that Katie Taylor did horrible, but in spots she did do horrible. And she just wasn't finding a way to keep Amanda Serrano off of her. She landed some nice counters.
Right, Amanda Serrano was pressuring her the whole entire time, but what was she landing that was really, really clear besides that of the fifth round? Can someone please tell me, besides the fifth round, name me a round where you've seen a really, really flush punch land from Amanda Serrano that you clearly remember? Because I can name you several that happened overall from Katie Taylor in this fight, or I can at least point out to you in the highlights, who overall was landing usually the more impactful punches. I'm sorry, but no, Amanda Serrano, yes, she was pressuring her, but she did not win the fight. She did not do enough to overall outdo Katie Taylor's defense. At least her defense was better than that of Amanda. She did not do enough with her jab. She did not land enough punches.
She was fleet of foot, and she was fleeing a lot. And that really, you're fighting a New Yorker at home. People always say, like, oh, you got to impress the judges and things like that. So I don't see how she even won the fight, especially since she was in retreat mode and trying to pot shot. And she wasn't doing it.
Since she was in retreat mode and trying to pot shot. But were you saying that same shit overall about Jamel Charlo? Overall, in the Brian Castano fight when he was getting backed up throughout the majority of the fight? Were you saying the same shit about Floyd Mayweather Jr.? Even though he was clearly landing more than Manny Pacquiao in the fight, he was trying to pot shot Manny Pacquiao the whole entire time. Do you believe that Mayweather lost to Floyd Mayweather Jr.? Excuse me, do you believe that Mayweather lost to Manny Pacquiao? Like, get the fuck out of here. Like, don't get me wrong. I get it. There's certain fighters out there. There's certain black fighters that don't get promoted overall in a great light. I understand. But when you promote the type of narratives, the type of bullshit that this dude overall promotes and some of these other people, you're not to be trusted. You can't be taken seriously.
In a Floyd Mayweather sense, where the pot shots were like eye gauging and eye catching, and she really didn't slow Amanda Serrano up. So you have to look at the counterpart.
No, she did slow Amanda Serrano up a little bit. Amanda Serrano was, charging her basically the whole entire fight. But look at Amanda Serrano's face. She had a mouse in her eye as well.
And stuff, and consider all things and all factors. You're a champion. This is your division than hers. Why are you not having much effect? Why can't you keep her off you? You didn't really have any defense. There were many points in the fight where I thought Katie Taylor's body language was very bad.
You're talking about Katie Taylor having no defense. Listen, Katie Taylor is a flawed fighter compared to some other all-time great fighters, especially men's fighters that I've seen. But you want to talk about Katie Taylor's lack of defense. Let's talk about Amanda Serrano's lack of defense. Amanda Serrano didn't keep her hands up one goddamn time throughout this whole entire fight. And that's what I said in my fight prediction. Now, don't get me wrong. I did predict Amanda Serrano to win the fight by decision, by close decision. But I did say that if Katie Taylor wins this fight, it's going to be because the power and overall, her foot speed and her hand speed, and also a little bit of everything, it's going to give Amanda Serrano a little bit of problems. Amanda Serrano is kind of like some of those other elite power punchers that you would see, kind of like a Deontay Wilder. Once Deontay Wilder went in the ring with the Tyson Fury, he said, wow, you know what? I can't hurt this guy the same way that I hurt these other guys. I can't hit this guy the same way that I did these other guys. Wow, he can hurt me a little bit. He's faster. He's better. He's the most technical fighter that I've ever seen. And on top of that, he's near my own same size. So it is what it is.
Legs were unsteady, and she started to wilt. So, it looked like a fixed fight, robbery. Let me know what you guys think. Drop your thoughts in the comment section. Subscribe if you like videos like this. Another black eye for boxing. Amanda Serrano really won the fight. Katie Taylor, let me know. Argue in the comment section. Let me know what you guys think. Drop your thoughts in the comment section. And are you tired?
Well, I already know what I think of the fight. Katie Taylor won the fight. And Amanda Serrano, I'm sorry, she just did not do enough. But anyways, we're going to review another video. If this video ends here, it'll mean that overall that the video cut out, unfortunately sometimes it does that. So if this is just a video that I'm going to end up posting, then hopefully y'all have a wonderful day today. But hopefully we'll get the second video in here. Let's get into it. Good evening. So this is going to be the second part of the video that hopefully I end up posting, and hopefully I'm able to put this second part in. For whatever reason, when I ended up reviewing it the first time, this part was completely silent. So unfortunately, I did not get the second part of my video. All in all, very well cooked in there. But anyways, we're going to do the second part of the video right now. We're going to try to combine these two videos, hopefully, if I can. Unfortunately, for those of you, of course, that have any experience with YouTube, I don't believe allows you any longer, for whatever reason, to combine two videos into one video, but I could be wrong. So hopefully I find a way to do that. But anyways, we're not going to, make a super duper long part about this second part, but I found this boxing channel that I found very particularly interesting, overall, especially with the narrative that I thought that this guy was trying to push, or overall the opinion that he had. And once again, this is going to continue into overall the topic of the Katie Taylor and the Amanda Serrano fight. Anyways, this channel, if you want to check out this video, or if you want to check out this channel, I believe he is called the Woke Sports Fan. Personally, in my opinion, if you have woke in your name, something's already up, but hey, it is what it is. Anyways, he is going to give his personal opinion on the Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano fight, and he's going to be basically saying what overall a certain amount of the other channels, especially that of the LDBC and new media channels, really think about Katie Taylor, and what they truly wanted to say about Katie Taylor, and what they also like to say about Canelo Alvarez, Vasily Lomachenko, Gennady Triple G, Golovkin, Tyson Fury. And don't get me wrong, once again, are there such a thing as, great white hypes or Caucasoid or certain fighters that are pushed higher on a higher level, maybe even more than what they deserve to be because they want to put them over black fighters or black athletes? No doubt about it. But you can't make that case overall for every single athlete out there. All right, we have to take a look in a very objective and logical manner. If that person, if they're on a level that, many people rank them that they don't really deserve to be, or if they truly have the credentials. And Katie Taylor is a fighter that has the credentials. Anyways, this guy is really going to tell you overall that he has an emotional and a racial issue for the reason overall why Katie Taylor ended up winning the fight. He's not really going to state that directly, but you can say overall, you can tell, all in all, that with the things that he says, that's basically all in all why he's so pissed off that Katie Taylor ended up winning this fight. But anyways, let's get into the video. Let's see what this man has to say.
What's good, y'all? This your boy Wolf. We back with another video today. So, y'all, I know y'all watched that Amanda Serrano Katie Taylor fight. It was amazing. The action was great. I thought it was the biggest women's boxing fight of all time, obviously. But let's just be real. Amanda Serrano got robbed. She got robbed in her home state in New York, bro. How does that happen?
Now, it's going to be very interesting, this part of the video, because you hear this man overall, he basically states that he believes that Amanda Serrano got robbed, and he basically says it as if the fight should have been clearly scored for that of Amanda Serrano. But then later on, and this might come, a few minutes later on, I'm not necessarily sure, I can't remember, but you're going to see that not even he truly 100% believes that this was a 100% robbery, or that the fight was much closer than what he even personally scored it. But anyways, let's get into the video.
I'll tell you how it happens. It's because the media wants to make Katie Taylor to be the best female boxer ever. Let's keep it a buck.
Now, basically overall here what he just said, and I've been basically saying this for a very, very decently long time, the LDBC and new media, really all they are, and people can like this, they can not like it. I really don't give a shit. It just is what it is. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to offend anybody. All the LDBC and new media, and this guy has very, very similar opinions, all they are is a pro-black cult. That's all they are. Don't get me wrong, do I think that it is sometimes necessary to talk about fighters in, black fighters, especially maybe in a better light, or, talk about them in a more objective and logical light than maybe what certain boxing fans or what certain media outlets do. Sure, you can certainly debate that. But all these channels is basically the pro-black version of ESPN or Fox Sports News. That's really all they are, because they're very agenda and racially driven. They're not really driven overall to the truth. They're not really overall driven to logic and objectivity. They're driven to their truth, what they want to be the truth. Kind of like a woman overall when it comes down to when you hear them talk, oh, well, I have to accept my truth. Well, you can overall have your truth all you want to, but a lot of the times, the truth is usually very logical and objective, and sometimes it can be a little bit subjective depending on, the situation. But I'm sorry, but in my view, just taking a look at it logically and objectively, Katie Taylor won this fight.
Let's keep it up. And granted, full fight. I keep up with the sport. I know who's good and who's not in the women's division, right? I follow Clarissa Shields. That's really how I even got interested in women's boxing, when Clarissa Shields was coming on the scene,
Let me talk about that really quickly, because I doubt that this man, all in all, would be talking about women's boxing as much unless Clarissa Shields really overall was into the sport of boxing. Now, maybe I'm wrong about that, but there's nothing wrong overall with, admiring a person's skill sets or getting into a particular sport because there was maybe a black athlete that was in a sport that maybe is not predominantly, dominant overall by black athletes. Like when we take a look at golf, for example, probably not, there probably was not a lot of black fans of golf before the Tiger Woods era. And that's okay. It is what it is. Patrick Mahomes, of course, who is of a mixed demographic, I believe, but most people, of course, will call him a black quarterback. I'm sure that there's a lot more, black fans now that watch the NFL, now that Patrick Mahomes is one of the most dominant and one of the best quarterbacks in the league. But that's like that's like overall someone debating when it comes down to it. If someone was trying to be on the same bullshit as these guys, that's like, a Caucasian saying, well, Patrick Mahomes, he's just so overhyped, he's so overrated. The only reason why he's rated as highly as he is because he's a black quarterback and they want him to be remembered as the greatest of all time. Now, is there going to be certain analysts that probably do put a little of extra sauce, maybe give Patrick Mahomes a little bit more extra credit than sometimes what he deserves here and there? Maybe, could it also be, racially motivated? Absolutely, certainly. But don't sit here and tell me, if we're being logical and objective, that, oh, Patrick Mahomes, he's just trash, and the only reason why he won that MVP is because they wanted to appeal to the black demographic and blah, 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 just all this sort of stupid shit. Just is what it is. You can tell if you're intelligent enough and if you're logical and objective enough who is, a great athlete, who is great at their, certain profession, and who is not, who is overrated. And Katie Taylor right now, she has to be in the conversation, and that it really isn't even a conversation anymore at the current moment in time. She is the clear, undisputed #1 pound-for-pound fighter. And with that, there is going to be debates and arguments about Katie Taylor being the greatest female boxer of all time. And you're going to see that this guy has a very, very big problem with it. But you notice they don't give a shit when Claressa Shields was calling herself the GOAT, or overall the greatest women fighter of all time. Even though, when we really talk about it, she only has 12 fights. Now, just because someone has, a low amount of fights, that don't mean overall that they are debatably not the greatest of their profession, or at least, greater than someone who has more fights. But it's just very, very interesting because we heard these same guys when it came to Vasily Lomachenko, when he didn't even have, 15 fights in the resume. They said, how dare, people put Vasily Lomachenko on such a high level, even though he very clearly was on a high level because he came into the boxing game thrown into the lion's den with Guillermo Rigondeaux, Nicholas Walters, and a multitude of other champions when it came down to it. That's just, it is what it is. They said, how dare you compare Vasily Lomachenko to other fighters that, Vasily don't even have 20 fights. You know how insulting that is? No, what would be insulting is if Vasily Lomachenko was someone like a Mick Conlan or someone overall like that who had no legitimate wins over any champions whatsoever, and basically had a very weak sauce type of resume. Vasily Lomachenko had one of the best resumes on the planet when he was ranked as the #1 pound-for-pound fighter. So once again, if you're pushing a narrative about someone being a great big white hype, or someone being more hyped just because, overall Canelo Alvarez or Tyson Fury or Katie Taylor, they have the complexion for the protection. Or if you take a look at football, Patrick Mahomes, he's only hyped up so much because, he really is, the first all-time great dominant black quarterback that is on his level. We can say all this stupid shit all we want to, but at the end of the day, are they really great at their job? Or is there really some good data that you can prove to where they're not as good at their job as what others, as what others claim them to be? But anyways, let's continue.
I follow Katie Taylor. I follow Serrano. I like Alicia Baumgarten a lot. Shout out to Franchon. She's undisputed at 168. She won last night too. But at the same time, it's like, dude, Katie Taylor lost the first fight versus Delphine Persoon. I went back, hey, if I'm going to speak on something, I'm going to go back and know what I'm talking about. Have my own scorecard, see how I feel about the...
Well, you really don't know what the hell you're talking about, dude. I'm sorry, it is what it is. No personal attack against you, but if you're calling this fight a flat-out robbery, then that already tells me all I pretty much need to know, with your boxing acumen anyway.
It's unbiasedly. Right. So that's one robbery Katie Taylor's got.
And I really can't tell you. I believe that was the Belgium fighter that Katie Taylor had 2 fights against. I heard from a lot of people that they believe that the Belgium chick won. I did not personally see those fights, so I really can't tell you there.
Fight versus Amanda Serrano was the second one. Bro, it is what it is. They want to make Katie Taylor they want to build Katie Taylor up to be the quote-unquote greatest female athlete ever. Because right now, who do we see as the greatest female athletes ever? Serena.
Who is debating that Katie Taylor is the greatest female athlete ever? And if Katie Taylor is undefeated, an Olympic gold medalist, and undefeated in her professional career, and has wins over Jessica McCaskill, who I believe at the current time is one of the top 10 pound-for-pound fighters, and she also was able to beat Amanda Serrano, probably the biggest fight in women's boxing history, hands down. Should she not be remembered as one of the greatest female athletes of all time? Like, come on, man.
Simone Biles.
It's very interesting because Claressa Shields, they had no problem with Claressa Shields being called the greatest women fighter of all time. This girl don't even have 15 fights on her resume, and I don't know one A-grade fighter that she has ever fought. Now, she did fight Christina Hammer, who I believe is still ranked within the top 10 pound-for-pound, but Amanda Serrano is on a completely different level than Christina Hammer. Christina Hammer is a very stiff, overall, very untalented fighter compared to that of Claressa Shields. Amanda Serrano was one of the top 3 most talented fighters in the whole sport of women's boxing. I'm sorry, but Claressa Shields, she just doesn't have a win like that in her career.
It is what it is. This Katie Taylor is day one. Katie Taylor is they hope.
You see that? You see what he said? He said Katie Taylor is their hope. He was talking about the Caucasians. Once again, I understand. But at the end of the day, if we're going to allege something like that, if we're going to allege that the Caucasians, when it comes down to it, that they overall are going to put a fighter or put an athlete on the level just because they're Caucasian, and all in all, just because there's not a whole lot of other dominant Caucasian fighters around or something like that, and basically they're more hyped than what they are credentials, then we have to really take a look at the empirical data. And if you're making the argument that Katie Taylor is more hyped than what she is credentials, no, I'm sorry, I can't allege that. I can't co-sign that. I can't co-sign that narrative. Katie Taylor just won the biggest fight in women's boxing history. She's an Olympic gold medalist. She's undefeated in her professional boxing career, and she's a very, very skilled fighter, at least for that in the women's circuit. You throw her, Claressa Shields, Amanda Serrano, now probably only Katie Taylor and Claressa Shields in a bag when you talk about their skill set, and whoever you pick out is whoever you pick out. But now that Katie Taylor's resume is like that, and she has 2 wins over at the current moment in time, 2 of the top 10 pound-for-pound fighters in the world, and that in women's boxing, she has to be the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter. She has to be.
You know what I'm talking about when I say they. Even right now, Claressa Shields freaking is a 2-time Olympic gold medalist. Katie Taylor is a 1-time Olympic gold medalist. Katie Taylor is undisputed in 1 division. Claressa Shields is the only 2-division undisputed champion, men or women.
That's great, bro, but when it comes down to it, I really don't give a shit. And I know a lot of people, they're going to say, oh, how could you say that? Claressa Shields, it's very obvious that she's a very good fighter for that of the women's sports of boxing. But I'm sorry, but does Claressa Shields really have repeated A-grade win after A-grade win in her career? I'll give her the Christina Hammer, or the whatever the hell that girl's name was, the German fighter. I'll give her the Hammer win. But besides that, I mean, come on. There's no wins that are even that close in her career to what an Amanda Serrano would be for Katie Taylor.
Claressa Shields is also only 27. Katie Taylor is 35.
And that's very interesting, because basically what you hear him try to say is that Claressa Shields really is still the true number 1 pound-for-pound fighter, and that Katie Taylor, that she ain't, as great as what Claressa Shields is. Doesn't Claressa Shields only have 12 fights in her career? So by that same logic, when they were talking about that bullshit about Vasily Lomachenko or these other fighters, oh, those fighters can't be that great because they only have 17 fights in the record, blah, 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 blah. But they won't say it with Shakur Stevenson. Like I said, you have to keep the same energy across the board. I don't care who you are. I don't care what demographic you are. All right? You have to be objective. You have to be logic and objective driven. And a lot of these guys, they're not. They're emotionally and they're racially driven.
But they want to call, I already see it, Katie Taylor, the GOAT. Is she the best woman boxer ever? Claressa Shields been called.
Why would she not be in that debate? She was undisputed in 1-weight division. She's an Olympic gold medalist. She has probably the biggest win out of any female boxer in the history of boxing. Let's just be real. I mean, you can debate Katie Taylor with anyone in terms of the greatest women fighter of all time, and not everyone is going to agree with that. But let's be real. Who are we really going to put at least 100% debatably over Katie Taylor? Could it be Claressa Shields? I mean, you could debate that if you want to. Claressa certainly has room in that discussion. But Katie Taylor, as of right now, has the decently better resume. When you talk about Layla Ali, she was a decently great fighter for the women's division as well. But no offense to Layla, but that really was not during a time to where, the boxers really overall were super duper talented within the women's division especially. Go ahead, take a look at some of those girls back then. It is what it is. Even Layla, her skill set, in my view, was somewhat limited. Now, even women's boxing today is still somewhat limited, especially compared to the men's circuit, but it's pretty much the best that it has ever been at the current moment in time. So if someone were going to debate that Katie Taylor were the greatest female boxer of all time, what issue overall would there really be? Are we really saying that, that if we were to rank Katie Taylor as the best or the greatest female boxer of all time, that really is something overall that just the Caucasians want to prove when it comes down to it because they just want a big white hype there? Or does Katie Taylor actually have the legitimate credentials to be debatably called the greatest female boxer of all time? Because it's not like this is men's boxing, no offense to the female circuit, but the female circuit is nowhere near as extensive as what men's boxing is. It just is what it is.
Herself the GOAT, and it's been a true statement since she was 25 when she became undisputed. She's so good.
You see that? Basically, he has no problem with Claressa Shields being called the GOAT. So basically, what is he saying? I'm pissed off because Katie Taylor, that white chick, when it came down to it, she ended up winning that unification fight. And overall, that was going to sting more because at least if Amanda Serrano won the fight, not only overall would that knock Katie Taylor off her pedestal when it comes down to it and basically off of her debatable #1 pound-for-pound ranking. That's why so many of these guys are so pissed off when it comes down to it. But on top of that, if Amanda Serrano won the fight, they would still debate that Claressa Shields, that she is the true #1 pound-for-pound fighter because she's still undefeated. And overall, Amanda Serrano has that one loss on the record. So this pretty much could have not gone any worse for some of these guys. They're very, very pissed off.
She went to freaking MMA. So I'm gonna talk about my.
That's right. She did go to MMA and she lost both fights, or excuse me, she didn't lose both fights, but she ended up losing a fight. What the hell does MMA have to do with winning a boxing fight? Please tell me. Please tell me. like, come on. Amanda Serrano went into MMA as well. She actually won by submission. Is Claressa Shields gonna end up doing that? She ended up losing to a bum in MMA. Now, that's not me criticizing Claressa Shields there, because I think that it would be unfair to completely criticize her for losing a fight in pretty much a martial art to where she's not really used to. So, that's not me completely bringing up Claressa Shields here, trying to put her in a negative light. But what the fuck does winning an MMA fight have to do with being the best female boxer ever? All right, and if you are going to use that argument, Amanda Serrano should be greater than Claressa Shields because she has an undefeated record in mixed martial arts. At least I believe. So that would mean that both Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano are above Claressa Shields. If you want to use that dumbass point, but we're not going to use that here.
Scorecard last night, right? That's why they doing it for Katie Taylor. They want to build her up to be something she's a great fighter, fast hands, great defense, tough as hell. I got to give her that. But this is my scorecard right now.
Now, listen overall to this scorecard. Listen to this dude who basically just told you that for the past 5 minutes, however long this video has been going on for, that he believes that Amanda Serrano got completely robbed, and that the reason why she got robbed is because Katie Taylor, she had protection because of her complexion. And listen to his scorecard. Listen overall to what he says.
I was fair to Katie Taylor too. I'm going to be honest with you. I thought she won the first round. I had Serrano win the second round. Katie Taylor won.
Well, if you had Serrano win in the second round, then you don't have a pair of eyes. Maybe those shades are a little bit too dark. I don't know what's going on. But Amanda Serrano definitely did not win the first 2 rounds. Definitely did not win the first 2 rounds. The third round, maybe it was up for debate. But even that round, I gave to Katie Taylor.
Third round, in my opinion. So I had Katie Taylor up 2-1 at that point. Fourth round, initially, I gave to Katie Taylor. The fourth round of Katie Taylor. Now, upon rewatching that round, I ended up giving it to Serrano because Katie Taylor, a lot of them flurries wasn't landing. A lot of them flurries she was just winging it. And honestly, she was hurt. She was almost out on her feet in a lot of ways in the fourth. She was
out on her feet in the 5th round. I don't think that she was out on her feet in the 4th round. But once again, isn't it so interesting? This guy, he's just talking about the first 5 rounds. He said that he debatably gave Katie Taylor the first 5 rounds, of course, for the first time viewing it. But basically what that means is that if you debatably gave Katie Taylor 3 of the first 4 rounds, then basically what happened in the second half of the fight? Well, you gave Amanda Serrano every single last minute of those rounds? Anyways.
Real hurt. So I think power-wise, I gave the force back to Serrano. But even if you want to just say you get that to Katie Taylor, I'll still get that to Katie Taylor or Serrano. Personally, I'll lean with giving it to Serrano off power. Round 5, obviously, Katie Taylor was damn near a zombie on her feet. She's out on her feet. That's a 10-8 round. You can't sit there.
Well, some judges would have scored it at 10-8 round. Some judges wouldn't. If you want a definitive 10-8 round, you have to get a knockdown. Katie Taylor was very, very tough in that round. Yes, she almost was a knocked out. I would have not even complained had the referee stopped it at that point. That's how bad she looked in the 5th round. But guess what? A fight is not just 1 round. It's so interesting because you hear all these guys whenever they bitch and moan about this fight. And let's be real, we all know who's mainly bitching about this fight. That mainly of the LDBC new media because they hate Katie Taylor just like they hate Canelo and Tyson Fury. But when it comes down to all, they always say that, man, did you take a look at round 5? She got all the power shots in there. But where was all these other power shots in the other rounds? Where are all these other power shots in the other rounds? Because I can tell you definitively, I thought Katie Taylor clearly outran Amanda Serrano in the first 2 rounds. Even the third round, I personally gave to Katie Taylor. Now, I gave Amanda Serrano rounds 4, 5, and 6, but almost every round after that I gave to Katie Taylor as well. So in my opinion, Katie Taylor won this fight 6 rounds to 4 or 7 rounds to 3.
Knees locked out and getting head just. I mean, the ref could have almost stopped the fight. It was that bad. It was getting that scary for Katie Taylor.
I somewhat agree with you, but at the end of the day, she wasn't knocked down, and the fight wasn't stopped.
I've seen dudes get hit like that for a round and the fight gets stopped. So that's
Well, this was the biggest women's fight of all time. This was a fight between 2 of the top 3 best pound-for-pound fighters. This was the biggest hands-down fight in women's boxing history. So at the end of the day, you have to give an elite champion in the women's boxing circuit like Katie Taylor a chance. Unless you believe that they're so out of it that there's no way that they're going to come back. And at least we have to give Katie Taylor this amount of credit. She showed very good heart. She showed, some of the good adjustments as well. She showed a good chin. And she showed all in all that after that round, that in my view, that she was able to outbox Amanda Serrano.
8th round. 5th round for Serrano. 6th round I gave to Serrano. 7th round I gave to Serrano. Round 8 I gave to Taylor. Round 9 I gave to Taylor. Round 10.
So basically overall, basically listen to that. Sorry I ended up dropping some. But basically listen to that. He said that the first time viewing this fight, now don't get me wrong, overall fights can be scored differently depending on how you watch them. But even in the first viewing, if you believe all in all that Katie Taylor debatably won, let's say 5 or 6 rounds in this fight, which is pretty much what he said, or could have, how can you call this fight a robbery? It's very clear that this man, just like Ego and just like some of these other channels out there, they're very pissed off that overall Katie Taylor ended up winning this fight because they did not want someone like Katie Taylor to be remembered as the best and the greatest female boxer of a generation.
And I was given to Katie Taylor. Despite Serrano landing harder shots, Katie Taylor's outworking her. So, Katie Taylor.
Well, people always say that Amanda Serrano was landing the harder shots. Where? I mean, sure, she's the harder puncher. But where overall in some of those rounds, especially within the first 3 and, the rounds after round 6, where did Serrano, I mean, of course, in the last 15 seconds or 10 seconds of the round, she did stumble Katie Taylor. But you can still debate that Katie Taylor got the last round because she stumbled Amanda Serrano, I believe, 1 or 2 times in the final round as well.
The dog. I like Katie Taylor, but I just don't like how they trying to...
No, you don't like Katie Taylor. You look at her as a big white hype. That's what you're trying to promote her as. No, you don't like Katie Taylor. You don't like Katie Taylor, and you're trying to push this bullshit over emotional pro-racial narrative. All right, let's keep it funky. Let's keep it real. I like Katie Taylor. Yeah, you sure do. You like Katie Taylor just as much as Skip Bayless loves LeBron James.
Let her up. Let her earn that, bro. So round 10, I was...
Now you hear overall what he just said. He said, let her earn that, bro. Let her earn that. Has Claressa Shields really 100% earned the greatest women's boxer of all time? When really I can't even name any other fighters besides Christina Hammer that she has on her resume. At least Katie Taylor not only is undefeated in her career, and let's also state this, I don't think that Katie Taylor's ever been knocked down, at least from what I remember, in a professional boxing fight. Claressa Shields has been, I believe, when it comes down to it. And on top of that, Katie Taylor, if you were to go by that dumb logic, she also has more fights won. And on top of that, she has the win over Amanda Serrano. And if you take a look at Katie Taylor's skill set, even compared to that of Claressa Shields, they're debatably right there with each other.
Giving to Katie Taylor.
But it's so interesting because he says, oh, well, let Katie Taylor earn that. Did she not earn that by beating Amanda Serrano? Did she not earn that by beating Amanda Serrano? Does anyone say with Serena Williams overall, let Serena Williams earn her greatest of all time, overall occupation because, when you take a look at Steffi Graf and Margaret Court, she didn't win overall as many Grand Slams as them. Now, of course, Serena Williams, she has one more Grand Slam. I believe in that as Steffi Graf, but Steffi Graf did something. She had the Golden Slam. She won the gold medal in 1 year. She also won all the other slams. Has Serena Williams ever done that? But allegedly, Serena Williams is nowhere near on the Steffi Graf level. Or, nowhere near on the, or overall, Serena Williams is way above Steffi Graf and way above Margaret Court. Like, get the fuck out of here. Don't get me wrong, all those athletes that I just mentioned, great athletes, and you can debate whoever you want to. But it's very clear that this dude right here, that he's pissed off because he had a very big emotional and pro-racial issue heading into this fight anyway. Which means what? You're not reliable.
It's close though. It was close. And how I do my scoring system, I try to go point fighting, count punches, count punches.
Well, no offense, dude, but that also tells me that you really don't know shit about boxing. Because when you score a boxing fight, you're not supposed to score it 100% just off of point fighting. It's a part of that, but you mainly have to score it off of who is landing the more impactful punches. Because if someone, let's say, lands even a couple jabs, but then someone in return hits them with a good whopping left hook or a good whopping right hand, you know, you have to overall basically say that, okay, you know what? The person that landed the harder punch or the more impactful punch and did more damage, that's the person all in all that got the advantage in that exchange. So it is what it is.
That last 15 seconds, I gave it to Serrano, though, because she buckled Katie Taylor. Like, it was already close. I had to Taylor a little bit. But then Serrano hit her with something, hit her with some hard shots at the end. It buckled her and kept hitting her with a couple hard ones at the end. I was like, I got to give it to Serrano. It was already a close round, but you almost...
I didn't really think it was that particularly close. I mean, it was close somewhat within the first 30 seconds. Then Katie Taylor, well, the round was very close. You could debate it win either way. I personally gave it to Katie Taylor, but if you gave the last round to Serrano, I wouldn't mind as well. But Katie Taylor stumbled Amanda Serrano as well. She hit her with a good left and right that overall had Amanda Serrano a little bit wobbly.
Somebody showed it. Katie Taylor knee was about freaking, what? I want to say probably like a foot off the ground. I almost was a legit knockdown. So that's a Serrano round. So at the end of the day, I had it 4 rounds for Katie Taylor, 6 rounds for Amanda Serrano with 110-8 round. So to me, I had it 96-93.
Well, I had it about 96-93 as well, just in the opposite direction. But what that tells me is that you really don't know what the hell you're talking about. You don't really know how to score a boxing fight. And that doesn't really surprise me because the majority of people out there really don't know how to score a fight worth of shit. And that's not me saying all in all that every scorecard that I get is just going to be 100% accurate. But all in all, you know, usually I'm at least a little bit more logical and objective, you know, than, certainly more than these channels. It is what it is. But anyway, that's really about it for today. I just thought that I would review the second part to that video because I thought that it would be very particularly interesting. That is the main reason why so many of these guys, especially, let's be real, these LDBC and new media channels are claiming that this was a robbery because they're very pissed off that Katie Taylor is now probably going to be remembered not only as the best female fighter or boxer of this generation, but debatably as the greatest female boxer of all time. And like I said, certain people, they can disagree, but who, I mean, like I said, you can maybe put her up there with Layla Ali or Clarissa Shields, whoever you want to, but like I said, there was no bigger women's boxing fight than this fight. So it is what it is. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.